Hey everybody, Summerhill Cinema 700 here, and you're probably wondering what the hell is this? Why do I have a microphone? I'll explain this all right now. If you watched my last video, I explained that the current camera that I've been using for my videos for the last little while, which is an older iPhone, um, has ran out of space. And I just don't want to deal with it. I need to get a new camera at some point, but right now I'm actually using the computer, or the camera rather, that's on my computer, built into the computer. And it's not too bad, and I have this like little microphone thing. Um, that'll do the trick for now, at least until I get a another camera. So I'm just doing these videos in the computer lab here for the time being. But anyways, um, I rewatched the Amityville Horror today, the original, and I hadn't seen it in quite a few years. And I thought to myself, oh, it'd be kind of a cool idea to make a video talking about some of these films because while I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, God, there were so many great films that came out in the 70s that were, religious horror type films. Obviously, I think that the big craze started with, of course, The Exorcist, which is one of the most uh, well known horror movies of all time, but kind of the defining piece of cinema, I think, from the whole kind of religious occult type of paranormal horror that took place throughout the 70s, because there's been films like that since then, but that was and before, but that was the decade I think that really captured that the feel of these religious films. Of course, back then there were a lot more religious people too in Western culture, or at least like in North America and things like that, than there are today. There's a lot less, so it was a lot more real to a lot of people because if you go back in time, there were higher rates of people who were religious, Catholic, Christian, whatnot, in North America and things like that. So it had more of an impact, I think, these types of films than maybe the audience today, because a lot of people not being religious might not find them as scary. But if you know anything about religion, or you grew up in a family that was a religious family, then these films would probably have a lot more of an effect on you. But anyways, there's so many great religious type horror films that came out in this decade. Like I said, when I was watching Amityville Horror, I just remembered how many there were. And of course, Amityville Horror came out in '79, and so it was one of the last of that decade, or it might be the very last of that whole craze. Of course, like films like the Exorcist, like I mentioned, and the Omen. So I just thought I'd just do a video discussing some of these films, some of my favorites, some of the ones that I have here in my collection, and there's some that I haven't seen as well. There's a few here that are a little bit lesser known to people, but yeah, let's talk about the Amityville Horror for a sec. But again, the first film here, which I rewatched today, and like I said, I hadn't seen it in quite a few years, and I think it's just such a great film. And even though not a ton happens in it, like you don't actually physically see ghosts or demons throughout most of this film, but it creates that really creepy atmosphere, and it's just in this really neat house. And of course, the fact that this is based somewhat on a true story um, makes it even more creepy. The fact that this guy really did in real life kill his whole family in this place, and then people moved in there and all sorts of strange events happened. We won't get too much into that, but that also adds to the effect that this movie has, of course, when it's based on a true story. But this is just such a great film, I think. And again, some modern audiences might find this one boring because it has a story. It builds slowly. Slowly, things start happening. But just an awesome film. I just have I'm just putting them on the floor here. I do have the box set as well from Scream Factory, the Amityville Horror Trilogy. Now, I've watched small bits of Amityville 2, The Possession, and don't remember much about it. Of course, that one's from '82, and then this one also has Amityville 3D from '83, which I've never watched. So I've never actually watched Amityville 2 or Amityville 3D in their entirety. But of course, there's so many other Amityville horror movies too. Um, that spin-off movies and non-official, the ones that are not officially a part of the trilogy and stuff like that. I don't know how many there are. There must be like over 20. It's crazy, but definitely have to give those a watch at some point. I think that this box set too from Scream Factory is out of print now. I haven't even opened mine, but I probably should. I should have honestly watched this version because I think it has a new scan or something. But anyways, nevertheless, let's talk about how about the Omen. Still got to get a physical copy of that. Scream Factory did a box set on that one as well. But again, another just great 70s religious type horror film. Very creepy, great story in my opinion, and just an awesome film. But again, with that, with the Omen films, I also haven't seen the other ones except for the first film. But just a great one. Actually, this one we'll leave till last. Let's move on to something here that's a little bit more, well, not obscure for us horror fans, but for the general audience. Here's another good one that kind of follows along that same line. I can't even remember if this one even is religious, but it's just a really great 70s paranormal haunted house type film, and that's Burnt Offerings. I've done a review on this one in the past. It might have been a couple years ago or whatnot. But this is a really great one, too, if you're into that, 70s paranormal haunted house type film. I can't remember if this one has much religious material in it or whatnot, but nevertheless, it's a really enjoyable film. I highly recommend this one. Here's a couple ones that I haven't seen yet. And again, with this one too, don't know if this is a religious type one, but I know it's a paranormal haunted house type film, and it's called The Legend of Hellhouse. This Blu-ray here is from Scream Factory. This one looks really interesting. This one's from, was it 1973? And then this other one here, I know this one is a religious type horror film. You can tell by the cover. And this one's from 77, and that's The Sentinel. And I haven't watched this one either. But I've listened to a bit of the soundtrack, and it's like this really beautiful classical soundtrack. But this one looks really good, so I'm looking forward to checking that one out soon. Maybe I'll do a review of a couple of these since we're in October now. Right time of year to do these. Here's another one here that I haven't seen. And this kind of looks like more of a grindhouse type one, like more of a B movie. But this one did come out in that same era. This one's from 76. This is called Kathy's Curse. This is a Blu-ray from Severn. Haven't watched this one either yet, but this one looks interesting. Definitely looks like they've got inspiration from like The Exorcist. It even says on the back that it's, what does it say here? Experience one of the strangest Exorcist / Omen / Carrie inspired grindhouse hits like never before. Now transferred in 2K. But anyways, so it looks like a cool one. So if you guys have seen any of these ones, like The Legend of Hellhouse or The Sentinel or Kathy's Curse, let me know what you thought of them without giving it away because I haven't watched them yet. But curious to see what you think of those films. Another one here. No, I'm kind of cheating on this one because it's not from the 70s. I think this one's from 80. Yeah, it's close enough. And that's the Changeling. This is a really great. Again, I don't think this one really had much religious context to it, but just really, really freaking creepy haunted house type movie. A bit of this was filmed too here where I live in British Columbia, Canada, which is kind of cool. Maybe I'll go do a filming location video sometime of the Changeling because the castle that this was filmed is right here where I live. So take a look at that. But this is a great one too, and the Blu-ray is available from Severn Films. Also has a great soundtrack, classical type soundtrack. And that's just a really great creepy film. But just all these films that came out of that era, there's something about them. They just have a really creepy atmosphere. The 80s is often looked at as like the golden age of horror. And I agree. All like the slasher movies that came out and just horror in general was just so incredible, the amount of stuff that was coming out in that decade. But when you look back at the 70s, the stuff that came out then too was just incredible. Personally, I think especially for these religious type occult horror films, but also films like, like you look at all the ones, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or the original The Hills Have Eyes. There's just tons. Halloween, right? And that really, a lot of people would say that that's what started the whole slasher craze. Really, I think it was probably Black Christmas, films like that. But Halloween kind of really brought it into the mainstream. But God, just the entire decade of the 70s, just the horror movies that were coming out then are just they're timeless. They're just so creepy, and that'll take me to what we'll talk about now quickly, The Exorcist. Now, The Exorcist is another series which I've only seen the first film. Never bothered watching the others. I heard the second one was bad. Third, The Heretic or whatever, is relatively good. Or no, sorry, The Heretic is part 2. But the third one I heard is quite good. But just never bothered watching any of them just because of how great the original film was. And I rewatched The Exorcist. I think it was earlier this year. And my God, it's just, even to this day, in my opinion, it holds up as one of the scariest movies ever made. And it's just, it feels so real, you know? And things like this have happened, whether you believe it or not. I personally do. I've witnessed bizarre things happen, and I've heard enough stories to know that this type of stuff is real. That's my opinion. But so to me, that just makes it that much more creepy. But just the setting, the music, the story. Again, this is a film that some people today, this audience, the modern audience, might think, oh, it's boring because there's not jump scares every 10 seconds. But that's what a horror movie is supposed to be. It's supposed to have a story. It's supposed to build up slowly. And I think a perfect horror movie has you where, you know, even the slow parts, or the parts where, say, like in The Exorcist, like the parts where they're not in the house, where this, you know, this girl's being possessed by this demon. Even when they're not there, you see other places that the characters are in. You're constantly thinking about that, and it keeps you wondering what's going on there. And I think a great example of that would be the movie Chud, which I talk about a lot, from 1984, one of my favorite horror movies. Is you don't see the creatures, the monsters, that much, but that's what makes it all the more creepy, is the fact that you're wondering what's down there, right? Because sometimes the things that we can't see are more scary than the things we can. And that's what I know. The Exorcist does a great job of that. Just the whole story, the build-up, in my opinion, is just, that's what makes a great horror movie, or just a movie in general. It's just a story out, you know, that builds up, and then, you know, you get a crazy finale, and that makes it worth it. And for so long, there was like barely any movies doing that, at least in the horror genre. You know, there have been great horror movies in every decade. But it seemed like for a period of time, I think more so in the 2000s, where there was just a lot of bad crap coming out as far as like horror movies goes. It seems like the horror craze is coming back now. We'll go to that in a second, but going back to what I was saying earlier about films building up a story, I think another great example of that's like the original It miniseries. A lot of people find that like slow and stuff like that. I personally find it fantastic. I think it blows the new 2 movies out of the water. It's just, I've always loved the original miniseries from the first time I watched it on TV when I was like 14 or something. It just scared the hell out of me. It still creeps me out. I just find it way more creepy. Tim Curry just did such a great job in the locations and everything on that lake with the building. Oh, it's just crazy. But anyways, I'm kind of veering off to the subject now. But what I was getting at was that I think that, yeah, horror movies are definitely making a comeback in the theater. We're seeing a lot of great stuff coming out again, and we can thank, you know, like the It reboot or remake from 2017 to be I think a big reason for that. But there's been a lot of great movies that I've seen over the last few years. Like I said in my last video, I saw the new Candyman film, and I thought that was really enjoyable. Of course, if I had to pick one movie, or rather a series, that I think is the best of like the 2010s, this is what I'd pick. You probably already know. That's got to be the Conjuring series. I just watched the first 2 for the first time last year. I did reviews on them, and I don't think that they're just 2 of the greatest horror movies from the 2010s. I think they're 2 of the greatest horror movies ever made. And these you can thank for bringing, like, you know, horror back to the mainstream audiences. But they're just such amazing films, and I can't believe I didn't watch them sooner. But these, again, because the first 2 films are based in the 70's. The first one being, I think, more in the early 70s. And then the second film, mid to late 70s in England. First one being in the States, I think Rhode Island or something. They just have the feel, again, of those 70s religious horror films that we were just discussing. These films capture the time period so well and are just, in my opinion, masterpieces of films. And I saw the third one also because it came out this year in theater. And again, that one played right along with the whole religious context and whatnot. So, anyways, 15 minutes into this video now. That's a nice thing about using this camera on the computer is there's no time limit. I don't have to worry about space because it's got a lot. But I think we've covered everything pretty much. It's just, this is just a handful of the stuff in my collection that I wanted to discuss. Some of the ones that I think you should watch if you're into, if you've seen The Exorcist and you're thinking to yourself, oh, what other films are out there like this from this time period? Well, the ones that I mentioned, like I said, the Amityville Horror, Burnt Offerings, the Changeling, again, even though it's from 1980, it's going to have that same type of feel and atmosphere. The Omen, you definitely want to check out the Omen. And then some of these ones that I haven't seen, too, that you might want to give a try, like the Legend of Hellhouse and the Sentinel. So if you've seen any of these movies, let me know what you think of them. And let me know, I want to hear what's your favorite horror movie from the 70s? What's your favorite religious, paranormal type horror movie from the 70s? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear it. I just love discussing this stuff, and I could go on about it for hours. But I think that's pretty much all there is for this video today. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll have more content coming soon. Again, I will be getting a new camera at some point, but this might even work out for a little while. It's not too bad. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Take care.